Well, so lovely to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining me, man.
No, always a pleasure, Sandeep. We haven't spoken in ages, so might as well use this as an excuse to catch up.
Yeah, get some sound bites out of it, Otherwise, it's like after 2 hours, I'm like, there was some interesting stuff we spoke about. And it's
We'll
just
get some
wasted.
reels.
Yeah, wasted on Airtel. But yeah, man, it's been what now, 10 plus years you've been doing stand up?
Yeah, I think my first ever proper show was with you. I think you were hosting at the Comedy Store. That was the first weekend that I did. I remember it was you, me, and uh, Amit Tandon. I think that was the lineup. So that was the
Must have
first
been
time that I
2013-ish.
yeah, I think 2012, 2013. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was it.
man. Those days seem a long, long time ago. But
Mm.
since then you've of course, you've been mainly a solo artist, but then you joined the collective, doing that particular, that avenue of, short sketches and these things
Mm.
that the internet at that point was really consuming, and especially the Indian audience was really consuming. Um, I want to ask you something which is not really comedy related, but it's something which I find I've been asking myself over the past few years is how important is it for you to keep a distinction between what you do and who you are?
Ooh, interesting. I think it is a challenge because I think one of the things that I have struggled with, particularly over the last few years of the pandemic, was I think we had to, all of us as comedians, and I think as most people in freelance slash creative professions, had to sort of pivot to finding different things to do for life, for livelihood, whatever you might want to call it.
Hmm.
And I think what I found myself doing is taking a lot of the things that, for lack of a better word, I was, or my personality, or my likes and things that I enjoyed doing, and actively try to turn those things into work.
Right.
So like for instance, I enjoyed playing video games, still do, love playing video games, and I would keep, and I think it's a result of how everything has become content in the world right now. Like, I hate that word, but just everything is content.
Yeah. Yeah.
And content can, there's just an opportunity all the time. I think that's why we constantly have everyone making a reel, everyone making a story, everyone taking a selfie of something, because subconsciously every moment is content or potential content. And I find, for myself as the creator, artist, whatever, I would be like, no, I need to take what I'm doing, take my life, and turn it into content.
Mm.
Which I think for many, like a couple of years, particularly, I would say like 2021, 22, the last, like the 2 years before this, I was fairly unhappy with my life.
Mm.
Because I was like, I've just, I have just made who I am work. I mean, just my being and existence now feels like it's an opportunity to be working, which I don't think is a sustainable way to function and exist in life. So I
Mm.
think now I've really actively started separating. Uh, what I do is comedy, but who I am is a very different person. I think you'll know this about me as well, that a lot of comics are very switched on and always comedian and always funny, but I have tried to always be like, I'm a human being off stage and the comedian on stage, and I like to keep it that way.
Mm. And that's something which is what I went through as well, especially pre-lockdown. I mean, I went through this
Mm.
where, of course, the being on stage is a lot of the fun, but then
Yeah.
that sort of spills over, and the next thing you know, because for every big or relatively big show you do, whether it's a corporate or a public engagement or a public audience, you
Yeah.
have to put in the time at these open mics, at these smaller shows where you put your material to work, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of those times there's no money, there's no fanfare.
Oh
In
yeah.
fact, it's with more comedians. And
Yeah.
then I feel when you lose focus of why you're doing comedy, which is to get laughter and to sort of say what you want to say on a stage or to people
Mm.
listening, then the fluff starts filtering into your head. Like, why aren't you getting more crowds? Why aren't you getting the
Yeah.
specials on these big platforms? And then comedians are
Yes.
great at putting other comedians down, right? They put this element of doubt going, oh, you could have been as good as this guy if you'd already done it in this language, or you could have done it this many times, or
Yeah.
been on YouTube this earlier, whatever. And I realized that at that point, the 90% of fluff was keeping me more engaged than the 10% I mean,
Yes.
the actual joy of performing. And I took that into the lockdown, right? And then obviously, as you just said, we had to kind of do these things to be, I mean, we felt we had to stay relevant by doing these things, but in the reality of looking back, actually, we could have been absolutely fine just coming. I mean, the
Yeah.
money would have been
Yeah.
good on Zoom shows and all that, but there's this need, like I could hear people say, I need to get back on stage, because there's this fear I think we have as artists that we're only as good as our last show, right?
Oh yeah.
Or we're going to forget what it means to be that. But in some way, I've kind of let go of that, because I think what used to happen towards 2019, 2020 is like a bad joke or a joke not landing or another comedian's joke being funnier. Ref- Another person's joke being funnier would automatically in my head translate to you're not funny, or a
Yes.
joke going bad in my head would be like, oh, you're a bad person. And that's, as you said, it hurts, right? It's not a healthy way to live, because then every day you're so kind of fragile, and every show kind of is make or break for you as a person, and not just
Yeah.
as a career but as an actual functioning human being, and that takes a toll.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that distinction is it takes time, but it, I think, is
Yeah,
essential when
I
you're in
think
this
everyone
space.
figures it out at their own sort of pace. Like,
Mm.
particularly for me, I think I reached a point a year and a half ago where I was actively telling people that, I'm done with stand-up comedy. I don't want to do this thing anymore. And um, I think for me, it was I would keep giving myself reasons that, oh, I can't talk about the things I want to do because there's censorship from
Mm.
everywhere, and I can't do this thing because I want to do long form comedy and I want to do 1 hour specials, but now everyone wants to put out 90-second videos and go viral from that. But I think eventually, and I sort of realized and processed this, was I think that me sort of telling myself and others that I want to quit doing stand up comedy was sort of, in a way, just rationalizing in my head, just not being able to deal with the fact that what I was doing was just different. So in the sense that I was trying to tell myself that I don't like this, whereas in actual fact I love stand-up comedy, but it was just that it had just become a little different, a little bit more difficult. And I think my mind and my body was resisting that change, and I think we all at some point have to keep evolving.
That
And
fear,
I
right?
think,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Now, that was that fear for you, that you've come out of the lockdown a different person, and as a result, a different comedian, or was that fear that you're not going to be as good as what you were pre-lockdown?
I don't think I ever had fear in terms of myself
Mm-hmm.
being good enough or not good enough. I think I have always been confident enough in my ability to get on stage and do a job. But
Right.
I felt fearful of, have I done enough in
Mm.
this lockdown? Did I waste this time by sitting and, I spent a lot of my lockdown just doing a lot of things that I had the luxury to do because I was like, okay, I have a little bit of savings, so I can afford to sort of sit for a few months and just be like, okay, you know what, there's no work, that's fine.
Mm.
Obviously first few months of that was terrible, where I was like, oh my god, there's no work, there's no work, there's no
Yeah.
work. And then you reach an acceptance of, okay, this is why you have savings, like this
Yeah.
is for exactly these reasons. But after a point I was just like, this is sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Can you
Right.
catch
No,
where I
no,
was?
I think that's absolutely terrifying, right? We were talking about this idea that suddenly, you know what,
Yeah. Hmm.
um, I'm off my rhythm, right? I'm not hitting the road running. All these things, the social conditioning is so strong. Like when
Hmm.
I'm doing this, I haven't gotten onto a public stage in a while now, and there's that suddenly you wake up going, shit, am I letting down my creative potential? Am I not doing
Hmm.
what I should be doing? Should I be on stage hitting it? And then I'm like, you know
Yeah.
what, um, this is in fact more beneficial right now, these conversations I'm having on the podcast, doing these things. It's because, I mean, my inputs for my material is by living a life and not just chasing after every joke. And I
Yeah.
feel what you just said about taking time to do what you enjoy not just gives you a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment in living a life every day,
Yeah.
but without you knowing it, it's also feeding that engine that eventually puts out the jokes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I think I sort of was getting back to the point that I was actually making. So I was
Yeah.
doing a lot of these things, and I think coming out of the lockdown, my only thing was, did I not do enough in terms of the alternative things that everyone else was doing, the hustle, for lack of a better word, of
Yeah.
sitting, and there's so many people who were like sitting and just like live streaming every day and sitting and creating like these entire streaming their video games and playing and actively collaborating with other artists. And like we saw people like Samay who did so much with chess. We saw
Right.
Tanmay who started his own entire streaming situation. We saw so many people. I mean, I started a football show with Neville and Kautuk. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I was like, was that enough? Like this small football show, I could have done so. Like there's always the thing
Yeah.
of I could have done so much more to get more followers, more numbers, because eventually it's all, over the last few years especially, it all became a numbers game,
Yeah.
rather than the game of skill or comedy or art. It really eventually boiled down to every brand manager, every artist manager, every agent was like, what are your numbers? Do you have the followers? Do you have the subscribers?
Yeah.
If not, then it was almost drilled into your head that you're nobody, and I can't sell you with your 50,000 subscribers. You need to have 1 lakh subscribers for me
Yeah.
to even start thinking about selling you. Like these are conversations that we've had, and those really were the doubts and regrets that I've had of, uh, because I've realized that the work we do, the stand-up comedy, and as you alluded to as well, the actual stand-up comedy, the fun part of it is a very small amount of doing the shows, the corporate gig or the public gig, or just the performance is a very small aspect, especially these days, and in this industry, maybe more specifically to India, because now every comedian is required to be a content creator, an influencer, a streamer, writer, everything. Like you, a brand consultant. Like this is what the agencies will expect of you. That okay, you need to be good at everything so that we can make you money. And I think after a point, you have to be like, do I want to be all those things? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's perfectly fine to just pick one thing, be good at that, and stick with it. And yes, you may not make crazy amounts of money, or you may not make money immediately off it, but I think it's about defining what is good enough, and just enough for
Yeah.
yourself, and then you can go from there.
Do you feel? I think that's really well said, because the thing is that it's like it's really otherwise impossible to keep um, your balance, right? Because there's always a new platform coming out. There's always a new platform which is getting people noticed. Like, remember the early days, everyone's like, are you on Twitter? Oh, you should be on Twitter. Then you
Yeah.
should write a funny tweet about the newest topic that's released, or, land the first
Yeah.
punch. And then it's like, oh, Instagram. And then it became Instagram memes, and then Reels, and then it became Facebook pages. So it's never
Yeah,
ending,
it
right?
became
Because
Threads yesterday, which is the new Twitter. So
exactly.
full
And
circle.
it's full circle, absolutely. And the thing is, do you find, because you have been, over the past few years, gaming, you've collaborated with Neville for the podcast, you've collaborated with your wife for the other one you're doing on
Mm.
Audible, you do stand up still. So um, I'm keen to know, how do you identify what medium works for you? I mean, is it trial and error, or is there something that you're drawn to more? Because you are quite a prolific writer, if I'm not mistaken. Like, you've done writing in the past, writing projects, you've
Yeah.
written for other shows. So, what kind of process do you use to select which medium that you're going to express
Mm.
that particular, whether it's a football podcast or a travel show for television or OTTs,
Right.
or if it's a blog? So how do you kind of go through that process of selection?
I think earlier it was a case of just sort of going where the money was.
Mm-hmm.
That okay, somebody needs you to write a script. Okay, now suddenly you're a writer this month,
Mm-hmm.
or if somebody wants you to create a brand video or a sketch, and that is when we were running East India Comedy as a sort of a content creation company or a digital solutions company, beyond a point.
Mm-hmm.
And that was then. I mean, I looked at it sort of as a business. Now, as a more independent artist, it's a bit easier to make that choice because there's no real pressure to it, especially if it's my own project. I have the luxury to experiment. So with 442, the football show that I do with Neville and then Kautuk, we added as the third host of the show.
Right.
It started initially as just a podcast that we thought would be only audio. Then we tried it on the EIC YouTube channel. Then I was like, okay, I'm going to try putting the entire episode on Instagram and see how that goes. Then I
Mm.
put it on my YouTube channel. Then we decided, okay, no, this thing needs its own YouTube channel. So
Mm.
when it's your own thing, you have that luxury of like experimentation and seeing where it goes. And I think we were lucky to have like a fantastic community that we've built through that podcast. That's
Right.
very enthusiastic, and we built our own sort of over the years. We've built a voice for that podcast, which is nice. But for other things, I think I've accepted. I don't think I've ever chosen actively to do things on Instagram or social media. I have accepted that I have to,
Right.
which is a thing that I was very averse to earlier. I was like, no, I'm not going to do this Reels content and this 90-second, it's all nonsense. And they're just
Mm.
people dancing on the internet. And I don't want to start dancing. And I was just realized, I mean, I don't have to dance. I can just do 90-second bits of stand up comedy.
Right, there have
And
been
I
moments
started.
where I just basically am going through this jokes, there's a dance, there's this RRR thing. Suddenly this mic clip pops up and I'm like, who's this boring bastard, dude? Like, it feels like you really have to keep the energy high, but like normal conversation just seems like it's not going to get anyone's attention. And it doesn't when it's so fast, right?
Yeah, it's so fast, it's so immemorable, the
Yeah.
content right now. Because you just like, in fact, this was just happening like an hour ago. I was sitting with Sana and again scrolling through my phone, and I found this cat video that popped up,
Yeah.
and I wanted to show it to her. And while I was just showing it to her, my finger while showing it on the phone just flicked past the thing, and it went into the back button. And now that video is just lost forever. I mean, there's no way of finding that video. And I mean, that's just how fleeting it is. Like
Yeah.
you have it one moment, and the next is just gone. It's forgotten, and you're getting the next sort of hit of dopamine or whatever it is that you're trying to get, stimulation or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I mean, I have a very love hate relationship with social media. Mostly hate, very little love.
Right.
But yeah.
No, because it's, do you feel like I've invested so much by putting together these thoughts in the form of a joke and telling those jokes and then suddenly, as you said, it's something which is inconsequential in a way, kind of overrides the thing, or or do you feel like now what's the point of putting it on reels, because it's really not even that something that a person takes time to appreciate,
Mm,
but it's just like another flick, another screen up.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. I honestly, as I said, I have learned to accept, and I have accepted that reels are, I treat it as advertisements.
Right.
The same way that you would find 10 advertisements in the middle of watching your TV show to tell you about new products. I look at every reel that I put out as an advertisement to get people to come to my show.
Yeah.
And that's really how I look at it. I'm not looking at putting out, like a lot of people will do the reels of just like very average material, but just put out really consistently so that they keep, because the algorithm rewards, I think, two things really. It rewards quality and it rewards consistency. So if
Mm.
you don't have quality, you can get the same output really through being consistent with average material.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do that, and that's fine. If that's the path you want to choose, eventually it's about what your end goal is, right? If your end goal is numbers, which then will translate to potentially more brand work or making money that way, that's
Mm.
the approach to take. For me, I focus on quality. I will put out maybe a few videos every year, maybe 5 or 6 videos, and then I will cut all of that down into 90-second bits and put that on Instagram. And if they work well, which invariably they do, because I tend to like put out good content over there,
Mm.
so that will generally get shared on Instagram, on YouTube. People might start sharing it on WhatsApp, and that's sort of where that's it converts to real people coming to my shows, and that's for me the aim of social media. It's an
Right.
advertisement for my core skill set. So I have a touring show that I have the 1 hour, and I just tour that show, and I write a bunch of new stuff which is mainly for social media, that's exclusively for that, which I then use to market the main show. So
So you do
I,
it in
for me, it's
those
very clear.
shows. Right, right.
Yeah.
So you can chop that up and take it away from the.
Yeah.
Okay, nice. That's a nice approach because you have the audience there anyway, and they're on
Yeah.
board with you, and you've got them with your material, which is, I'm sure, fine tuned if you're doing it regularly. So then
Yeah.
you may as well package this new stuff within and get some sound bites or
Yeah,
video
exactly.
bites. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I want to ask you, what is? I mean, it's something which I find each person having a different answer to. I mean, of course, I hope so because everyone has the same answer to this. Then it's a bit weird. But what does comedy do for you? Um, yeah,
Ah, well, number one, I think it pays bills, which is important,
nice.
and which is the main reason. I mean, I don't have any other monetizable skill set right now that could immediately make me money. So, number one, it makes me money,
Right.
and number two, it still gives me satisfaction. I think I still enjoy being on stage. There will be times where I'll be backstage, I have to go up and host a show, and I'm just like, oh, why am I here? I could just be sitting at home doing nothing instead.
Mm-hmm.
Once I get on stage, I enjoy it, and particularly I think for me the joy of like writing a new bit and being excited about it and being like, oh, okay, there's something here, and then seeing that bit go from just like this thought on a piece of paper that you took on stage and then becoming like a 7, 8, 9, 10 minute
Mm.
bit, for me is still rewarding, and I enjoy the failure that comes with it. Earlier,
Mm.
like bombing with new material or anything, I would be like, oh my god, I've bombed and my life is over. Now I embrace the fact that it's not working because I know that it's the first or second or third time I'm trying it. It's not supposed to work. I mean, it's supposed to take its time to develop and become what it's supposed to become. So
Mm.
I enjoy the process. I think for me it's a great outlet. It I used to look at it, and it still is lifestyle wise not the best career to have in terms of like your health and sleep cycle and travel and this and that.
Yeah.
But I think I've learned to uh, work it in a way that allows me the freedom to do everything that I want to do in terms of my life and my health and my workout and routine and all of that, while also doing the shows and making money and all of that. I don't take on particularly hectic projects anymore.
Mm.
I will still do projects that involve a fair amount of work, but the like stuff that I would do maybe in my 20s, where I would be like, okay, there's a 3 month project where I have to work with a client every day for 12 hours and it'll make me great money and I'll do that. I don't do that kind of stuff anymore because I'm like, uh, I don't think the money, however much that maybe, is worth not living for that long, in a
Mm.
sense, or not living a fulfilling life. So it's a trade-off. I think everyone chooses, be like, okay, I will hustle and like not live my best life, so to speak, but then make a lot of money and maybe live better later, as opposed to have a consistently decent baseline of life with a bit less money.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, because it seems never ending, right? With money, especially,
Yeah.
and then the chasing of that and the popularity and the fame. And I think your stance on the popularity and fame, I think, is you've made peace with what you want it for, right? At the end of the day, to get people to
Yeah.
come for your show, and as a result, thing. But what have you kind of, because 10 years, you have these ups and downs. You see people coming up after you into the sort of comedy business, then sort of just booming and zooming ahead, and
Mm.
some of it doesn't make sense, right? You just kind of scratch your head going, what the hell happened.
Yeah.
But how have you approached that, the conversation around money and how much is enough, where do I draw the line, and
Yeah.
because you've spoken about the kind of pulling back from the
Yeah.
other aspects of it, like the schedule, the working with people and working smarter, working to a cycle that suits what
Yeah.
you find comfortable yet creatively enjoyable. But this money thing, I think, especially from talking to other comedians and spending time around it seems to always have a way of getting into the cracks and bothering you at some level, you know?
Mm. Yeah, so I think I've got fairly peaceful with that part of my conversation. So right now, I think as we're speaking, when we're recording this, it's July. So for me, like the last, like all of July, I decided that, I worked and toured quite a bit from like April to June, and I'm then going to be touring August to like October pretty much. So I was like, July, I'm just going to take off for just like downtime, spending time at home, spending time with my wife,
Mm.
working on my health, fitness, spending time with cats, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
And I think I've spent the last sort of 10 days thinking a lot about, this like life and money and introspecting with reading a few things here and there. And have learned and understood a few things about myself. So like especially when it comes to like comedy and talking about other comedians and what they're making and all of that. I think for me, I've reached that point where I'm very clear that I don't want to know, or I don't care what other comedians make. It's none of my business. Like there are groups, and you'll know, you've been a part of these groups and circles where like the entire conversation for an entire evening will be, oh, did you hear how much this guy got paid for this and how much this guy
Yeah.
got paid for this? And someone signs a deal, and suddenly your WhatsApp group with comedians is exploding that, oh, this guy got this money and all that. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I have actually on these groups very clearly told people that, hey guys, listen, I know you guys may like talking about this, but if you want to talk about what money comedians are making, please make another group and talk about it on groups where I'm not there, because
Mm.
I don't care about this.
Mm.
Um, I have realized that I'm a very competitive person by nature. Yes, I always want anything I do, I want to win.
Yeah.
So when it comes to sport, cricket, football, whatever it is, I want to win. Like I feel really annoyed if I do not win while I'm playing football. I
Yeah.
will shout at my teammates. I will throw a fit about it, or I'll be like, "Why am I not winning?"
Yeah.
And I realized that particularly with sport, or with anything, like it's very clear to define what winning is, because the rules of the game are defined by the sport.
Yeah.
You know that you to win in football, you have to score more goals than the opponent, and to win in cricket, you have to score more runs, take more wickets. But when it comes to life and career, who is defining the rules?
Yeah.
And it boils down to, do you want to let the people around you or the industry or the circumstances define the rules, or do you want to define the rules for yourself?
Create
Because
your own
there was a
game. Hmm.
yeah, so I think there was a great quote that I read that sort of stuck with me. It was very simple quote, which is that happiness is just results minus expectation.
Mm.
And if you temper your expectations to be realistic to what you can do and what you can achieve, the happiness is very easy to attain.
Nice.
So I think I have made my peace with the fact that even if I do not become that comedian who can sell 2,000, 5,000 tickets, 10,000 tickets, whatever, even if I am just that guy who sells consistently two, three, 400 tickets
Mm.
and can do like 4 or 5 shows a month with that, that's a great life for me.
Yes.
It's a life that's better than 99% of the people on this planet,
Mm.
and it allows me to do whatever else I would want to do with my time. And for me, just to surpass that, as per the rules of the game that I have created, is winning.
Yeah.
So for me, the idea, the I think the end net goal of life is to say that, okay, net I won as per my rules, and as per the conditions that I have sort of set myself. I see myself in that net positive. There have been times that I have been like, what am I doing? And my life sucks and I hate everything, as recently as maybe a year or 18 months ago,
Mm.
maybe even 7 or 8 months ago. But I think as I've just sort of thought about this, and maybe a little bit of therapy and introspection and journaling and stuff has helped, but it's helped me process that and sort of make peace with it.
And that's such a strange thing that we do, right? Not just comedians, but human beings. Is when it comes to these kind of questions, we typically look outside for the answers, right? We look at other
Yeah,
people's benchmarks. We always try
yeah,
to say, he or she became this particular success model, so let's try to
yeah,
copy that and apply that to our lives. But if we can kind of just look back where we came on this journey ourselves as an
Yeah.
individual, it's been pretty fantastic, right? Like, because if you had told the 2014 um, Azeem as a comedian that you're going to consistently sell out 400 seaters and you're going to get to do this how many ever times you do it, um, who knows? But we don't have the luxury of going back in time, right?
Yeah.
But because we all, when we started out, have watched the Louis C.K. specials of Madison Square Garden, or we've seen our, people who we kind of we aspire to be in some way, but it's not realistic because their story and our story is very different. I mean, your story, my story is very different. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think, the beauty of not being able to, you know, write your own story when it comes to the future is great because
Yeah.
if you had wanted what the 2013 comedian Nazim would have wanted, it probably would have panned out very different. And you might just be like, oh,
Yeah.
I wish I didn't have so much control over life, you know?
Yeah, and the things that we wanted at that time also were very small. And I think that's another problem that happens is that once you've set a target for yourself, it's always on to the next target. I mean, we leave ourselves very little room to just enjoy our achievements for a
Yeah,
little while.
yeah,
Like earlier, I think when we were starting out, my entire dream was that, I need to be able to do a weekend at the comedy store
yeah.
because I will receive 35,000 rupees, because which is more than my like monthly salary at my job, and I will buy a phone for myself.
Yeah.
That was the dream. I was like, oh my God, 35,000 rupees will change my life at that
Best in
time.
stand up was the benchmark. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and after that, it was always okay. Now 35,000 isn't enough. Now I have to get a corporate show. Now I need to make this money. Now I need to get an Amazon special. Now I need to do this. Now I need to do that. So after a point, I think up to a certain point, maybe that hustle or that mentality of chasing things is required
Yeah,
to a point. But I think beyond a point, there is uh, I think a point where like rational amounts ends and greed begins, and then
yeah.
we're just going after, no, I just want more and more and more, and but what are you going to do with that more? I mean, you may find very good things to do with it, like for me it's great to be able to just sit on a just a Saturday afternoon and chat with you because I have nothing else to do and I'm sitting here. But then somebody else might be like, oh, but I could be doing this podcast in a mansion that I own as opposed to a rented house. So I mean, it's all perspective about, as I said, it's about the rules that you set for yourself about what winning and what success is, and that's
Yeah.
it's for you to decide.
But how much ever you set for yourself, like whatever you want, comforts and luxuries. But even though it might be different, yours to mine, to my wife's, to your wife's, all all different individuals. But I feel after a point, leave the numbers out of it. I think it's a sense of diminishing returns. The satisfaction isn't as
Yes.
much, right? And that is something which we don't understand until we look back, going, you know what, that 35,000 felt so good when
Yeah.
the first check from the comedy store doing those 5 shows, and then you get the 1 lakh corporates, and as you get a little bit more, it's just not as great as that feeling of the first joke landing. You get the two
Yeah.
hours done, and I find that something which you can only appreciate in hindsight, because when you do get it, you're constantly your eyes are on the next target, right? The next thing, or
Yeah.
what the benchmark has been set by the standard. But I want to understand from the content quote unquote point of view.
Hmm.
um, there was that amazing feeling of getting that first laugh and telling those first few jokes we did.
Yeah.
How is your approach to what you want to talk about changed over the past 10 years?
I think it's got a bit more personal now, in the sense that earlier I think I used to think more of myself as just a joke writer or a person who just has to just I looked at myself more as a writer that set up punchline, clever joke, clever twist, clever callback. It was just more about me showcasing that, oh, look at me, I can write jokes well.
Yeah,
I think a lot of that was just due to the lack of the art form being developed within me. Like I was not particularly early on. I did not have great stage presence. I was not a storyteller. I could not really captivate an audience by like sitting down and just telling them a story for 10 minutes.
Mm.
And these are things that come with time. Some people figure it out earlier, some people it takes 10-15 years, some people have it immediately, instantly. Like a guy like Zakir was a born natural storyteller, whereas
Mm.
for me it would take me like 10 or 15 years to sort of reach to the level he was when he started as a storyteller. um so it's always a, a challenge to be like, what are you going to talk about next,
Yeah.
what's the next thing going to be. But I think I've made the distinction of when I write for the reels jokes or whatever, it tends to be more like topical throwaway stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas the more personal, the more real stories, I save that for like my live show. So the current
Mm.
show that I have, it's called Minor Celebrity, where I talk about just like the my experience of just being this in between sort of semi famous person.
Mm.
And it's sort of an hour about that. It does have bits here and there which are like news related and stuff like that, but the overarching theme of that is like my life.
Mm.
And similarly, the next hour that I'm planning is more it's about deeper things. It's like about friendship, it's about like my relationship with my wife, that kind of stuff. So I think as you grow older, I think your insights change a little bit. I think you start you become less like the things you want to talk about become less frivolous and more real,
Mm.
just purely through the factor of you having experienced more things and having more insights and opinions.
Yeah.
But yeah, otherwise I've always enjoyed writing about news. I think as that joke writer in me is always there, and I like to keep that part of me sharp. So like if there's something topical that comes up, I'm like, okay, I need to that's my job. I need to write like 90 seconds of jokes about this and go on a stage, try it out 3 or 4 times, record it, and put it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas for the live show, the 1 hour show that I tour, that I can take my time and like craft it and hone it over time. And then once you come and watch that, you're like, then you're watching a finished product.
Yeah, it's a nice balance that you've developed for yourself, right? That you are keeping that part of your writing skill active, because that is, and you do it really well. I think you put out some videos recently. But how do you navigate this? Well, and this environment we're in right now, because from the day I've seen you on stage. You've spoken about being a Muslim comedian,
Yeah.
speaking about your faith, speaking about the religion of Islam. Um, but do you feel that in today's day that you, by any way, any sort of um, backlash are you receiving? Any
Oh,
do you
yeah.
feel constrained? Do you feel any kind of threat for what you talk about or who you are as an artist?
I think there's a constant sort of discomfort attached to it, where I'm
Mm.
like, okay, there's a sense of feeling that if I write this joke, there is potential trouble that can come with it, and now it's like, is the joke worth it? In a sense, like, is the trouble worth
Mm.
what you would get from the video, or is the opinion worth expressing, worth the trouble? So there were a few things that I felt pretty strongly about, like the portrayal of Muslims in the movie Kerala Story. Like for me, that was particularly perturbing, and I decided that I wanted to talk about that.
Mm.
Got a fair amount of flack for that, but I think for me, because of being on like Twitter for a very long time and having a large following over there, and Twitter is where most of the, well, left wing, right wing propaganda and hate speech
Yeah.
globally happens. So um, for me now, it's a thing of it's not my first rodeo. I've been through this before. I know what the process is. If I've said something, I'll get trolled for 3 days, and then I'm back to normal.
It just implodes. Yeah.
um
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and I think for people who are experiencing for the first time, they really freak out, because I was talking to somebody who had a friend whose some tweet or some joke of theirs was deemed insensitive, and there's an organized machinery online that is designated to target and attack these people. And when the first time it happens to you, where you suddenly see that, as a relative nobody on Twitter who might have like a few hundred or thousand followers, suddenly you see that you're being attacked viciously by like 2,000 people, Like it feels like the entire world is out to get you. But then when you actually step back and you look at it from a more macro POV, it's basically 2,000 people working for the same organization. So
Yeah.
it's not as big as you think, but that's how they silence you. That's how they want you to think that, oh my
Yeah.
God, the entire world is against me. So I think I've, because of being through the cycle of me saying something, sparking outrage, going through that again, I've sort of got used to it. I am very careful with how I write jokes, in the sense that it might potentially, see, there is offense to be taken by everybody for everything. I think I
Yeah.
have done jokes that have upset DJs and doctors, and got trolled by like entire groups of DJs also. So I
Yeah.
mean, whatever you say, there will be a bunch. Like I've got trolled by football fans, uh, who are arguably worse than the right wing trolls. So,
I mean, the bigger fanatics
um,
for sure.
yeah, of
Yeah.
course, and they're very vicious people. But it's, for me, it's like, I write my jokes in such a way that legally there's not too much that people would be able to do. I mean, obviously, if they really want to, they could find a way and use all these. I mean, these various acts that are there, your sedition acts and the unlawful
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
acts and all of that, UAPA and all of that. And I mean, if that happens, that happens. What do you do? I mean, I don't actively go out searching for controversy. I try to say what I want to say, or I try to say what I feel needs to be said, when, especially when nobody else is saying it.
Yeah.
Um, because for
Yeah.
me, at the yeah,
No, go on. Sorry.
no, because for me, at the end of the day, it's like, I did not choose to be born a Muslim. Even though I very publicly rejected the idea of being a religious person or a Muslim or whatever very very long ago. But it is an identity that I'm stuck with, for lack of a better word, and just to constantly get like hate for that, irrespective of what you say, eventually it just boils down to that being the contention. And as somebody who we've also thought about having a kid maybe in the next year or so, and we're like, okay, do you want to have a kid who's going to be raised through this kind of like discrimination and stuff like that? Maybe it's not as big in the big cities as it is in like smaller rural areas. It is quite significant in like big cities and big schools and stuff as well. Like there's like a lot of Islamophobia everywhere, or
Mm.
and generally like a lot of people who are minorities, caste based discrimination. There's so much of that
Yeah.
in India. So
There's a lot of
that's
cultural
always been,
intolerance and religious
yeah,
intolerance. Yeah.
yeah.
So,
That's
I mean,
always been one of my things of, do I want to have a kid purely because, I mean, I do biologically, yes, but like, is it worth it for the kid,
yeah, I mean, it's a responsible thought process to go through, because it's just, it is what it is. You can have a romantic notion of, oh, no, no, it'll all change.
Yeah.
But, and just similarly to how you feel that identity is, whether you like it or not, and you get hate sadly for it. In my case, I, I'm bound by this thing, how much I want to not distance myself from it, but I want to kind of encompass other aspects of who I am. The visual impairment does stick. And,
Mm,
in your case, you get hate for it. In my case, I get pity, or I'm an inspiration for no fucking
mm.
reason, right? And sometimes I'm just like, you talk about these things because it's who you are, but it's not entirely what you
Yeah.
choose to be, right? Because there's so many complexities that go into making you, go into making me. And that's something which I feel, you're forced to sometimes, because as a Muslim comedian, you can't avoid it, right? People are like, oh, he doesn't want to talk about it, because I mean, screw what they think. But so did you ever feel that you have to take a certain stance, whether it's pro or anti, or somewhere in the middle? What was that
No,
decision like?
so
Because
yeah, I think so. For me, especially when I started out, a lot of the Muslim jokes was actually like, when you think about, like, when we started out comedy, it was a different government. So all of our jokes at that time, which people tend to forget, like all the jokes were anti-Congress and anti-Rahul Gandhi. I have an entire song which is pro BJP and anti-Rahul Gandhi from 2014, which is me singing with a guitar,
I think you should just
which
keep
people
that in
tend to
case.
forget. Yeah, we keep that still. It's still there.
Just pop it up sometimes when it
So
gets a little too
yeah.
much heat.
And even the Muslim jokes, in a way, at the time, for the time that did do them, was sort of truth to power, in a sense where it was that time where, like, there were these terrorist groups were rampant everywhere, and there was these constant terror attacks happening and all of that. And at that time it was sort of a way of satirizing that by talking about, oh hey, I'm a Muslim, we are like, just like I've gone on and said that, oh I am a Muslim, not a very good Muslim, not really a follower of Islam, follower of whatever it gets to get my takes to get my mom to shut up. That was my first
Yeah,
joke.
yeah,
And there was a joke about me being like me not being a good enough Muslim because I'm not a terrorist,
right.
which I mean would kill right now. But I don't think it's culturally appropriate to make that joke right now, because Muslims are being oppressed for that stereotype right now,
Yeah.
which wasn't necessarily the case, say, 10 years ago.
It was funny in its time because it was, I'm sure Muslims at that point also would resonate. They would laugh, because it was the
Yeah.
Ahmad, the terrorist, being the
Yes.
ventriloquist kind of that time. But yeah, at this point, you're right, because what happened in Paris with the that teenage,
Charlie Hebdo. Yeah.
yeah, not just that of course, but also
Oh,
recently
this recent one. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, that the police violence against things. So I'm sure like even black people would, like, Dave Chappelle has done jokes about black people and being and self-deprecating stuff about black people. But now with a lot of the violence increasing, I think there is so that's the thing. That's maybe something. Do you feel a responsibility to represent the Muslims in a certain way?
Not to represent. No, I think I've not. I would say not to represent Muslims, or even just to represent our industry, because there's so many things that things happen, particularly like, as I said, with the Kerala story, or with, like, these mob lynchings and this and that, which
Yeah,
um nobody wants to talk about it, because they'll be like, oh, if I talk about this, then brands won't want to come to me and work with me because I
yeah,
made like a public political statement or whatever. So I said, for me, it's uh, I think it comes back to that: what are your rules for life? What are
yeah,
your rules? For me, it's and this is something that I guess has come from my parents, because my parents have also done like a lot of social work, helping people, etc., etc., and they've always been the people to speak up when you hear or see something wrong being done. And so I find it very hard to just silently watch something happening, uh, especially if it's to people that I can relate to.
yeah,
And so in
yeah,
terms of, I can relate to the struggle. I have been in that situation where I have not been able to rent houses because of the background and the Muslim situation and all of that. So I can feel that. I mean, it's realities. It's not based off just, oh, I've heard that this happens and I'm outraged about it. It's stuff that I've experienced. So
yeah.
that's where that the need to express that comes from, and I feel that it's not expressed enough,
Mm.
particularly within circles of influence. Like, people from Bollywood don't talk about it. People from the comedy scene, apart from, maybe a Kunal Kamra, Varun Grover, maybe one or two others, very few people actually talk about this stuff.
Yeah,
And if people of influence don't talk about it, then the only people doing the influence is the propaganda machinery, and that's very damaging overall. So
yeah.
that's the reason I talk, just to be, even if it's just me as the one voice, maybe other people would speak up, seeing that. That's sort of the mentality that I go with.
Yeah, and it's very bold, right? Because the thing is that these things are, um, people are discouraged to talk about it because it's a story that is being created for a future which, if there's no other side to the story, then it's a very sad state of freedom that we enjoy, because then we're
Yeah.
kind of just letting a certain thing, and we can easily justify it, right, by saying no, no, no. It's been completely misinterpreted. It's not what happened, and it's okay to stay quiet. Then you can say, oh yeah, yeah, I knew there's always two sides, so I shouldn't jump to the conclusion. The next thing you know, it's already too late to make your voice heard.
Yeah.
But it's I think essential what you're doing, right? Because the, for anything to have one narrative, whether it's with a religious story, or whether it's a story about disability, if every disabled person's inspiration, and it's I know it's a very different world, different topic, but
Mhm.
you need multiple stories to make any society truly, worth evolving. Otherwise, it just becomes very bland, and it becomes very scary, because then
Yeah.
brainwashing, and then it just becomes a bunch of people who are just agreeing to a certain idea that is not
Yeah.
even theirs, but it's being sold as theirs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the best example of that particularly is actually outside, like brainwashing in India, sure, but the most brainwashed people I feel are the people who live outside India, like the Indian people who live outside,
Yeah.
particularly like your old NRI uncles are the absolutely the most brainwashed species, I would say, because like
Yeah.
I actually had this happen in a show that I was doing recently. So it was me and a couple of other comics, we were doing a big sort of auditorium show in Singapore. And I have a bit where I talk about like political stuff in India.
Mhm.
And there's one just Indian uncle living in Singapore just got up in the middle of the show and started shouting at me saying that you are lying about the country and how are you giving this misrepresentation? And I was like, Uncle, you live in Singapore. You know, how are you telling me, the person who lives in India, that I am lying about what's going on?
Mm.
And the reason is that most of these people abroad, like for every uncle in India, the main source of news has always traditionally been the newspaper.
Yeah.
And the newspaper is written by, shall we say, at least reasonably responsible people
Yeah.
who cannot just outright put propaganda in the newspaper. Whereas for the average NRI uncle, the news is all coming from WhatsApp, which is
Mhm.
just written by propaganda mouthpieces, copy pasted and then sent across, and it's written very eloquently and with great
Oh,
vocabulary,
very
so you're like,
compelling.
oh, it must
Yeah.
it must be true.
The videos are very
uh
compelling. You feel patriotic. You feel that you're wrong by having an opposing view. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and that's where that sort of comes from. But as I said, it's work to listen to both sides. It's much easier to just listen to what you're being fed and be like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, and I find that really something, I wouldn't say fascinating, but borderline even. This um, ignorance in kind of leaving a certain country, going and living somewhere else, and then blindly following. Not challenging the. I mean, I'm sure this man who said you're lying about how India is being represented wouldn't open his mouth if there's something done by the Singaporean government because he's terrified, right? But
Yeah.
so I find that weird. Like you're blindly following one thing, you're not challenging. So it goes both ways, of course. But uh, Azim, before we wind up today,
Mm.
clearly all of this, and you have chosen to do a podcast about this, which is the theme of mental health with your wife. I think it's called Sentimental.
Yes.
So what was the journey for you, and what have you arrived at when it comes to finding, a sense of balance, a sense of a place in your mental health? And what do you do for that? What was the need, and what was the journey like? Kind of finding a place where you're comfortable, you're feeling good about yourself, and you're able to get yourself out of these situations when you're either attacked or verbally kind of put down for who you are, or these
Mm.
experience even being rejected for an apartment. It hurts on a very profound level. So
Yeah.
what are these ways you've developed to kind of cope with these situations?
I think it's still like, particularly like the denying of the house and all that. For me, I was like, okay, I like when it's happened, I've actually just like laughed at the person and left and been like, okay, what else can you do in this situation?
Yeah.
I think for me, it's really a thing of what is under my control and what is not. I think that's been my largest sort of mental health thing of, can I control the situation? If not, then I can't do anything about it. I'll go about my life. There's no point sitting and like obsessing about it
Yeah.
to no end. I think I found that staying off social media helps tremendously, because you just realize that that's not the real world. You could get shut down on social media, you could get cancelled on social media, all of that, but your regular life remains.
Yeah.
And I think that's very important to acknowledge and understand that social media is not the real world. And with the trolling and all, I mean, I have my days where I am just like, you know what, just fuck this guy, and like I'll see one thing that will particularly trigger me, and then I try as far as possible. My thing is, do not engage, do not reply, because that's what they want.
Yeah.
This random dude who has 4 followers, that's the maximum attention anyone's going to give him. But sometimes he'll just say something, or he'll say a word, or he'll say something that just really triggers you, and you're just like, I want to take this guy down. And sometimes I will, like, a lot of times I'll be me. I'm listen, you're just attacking me for with random Muslim slurs. So then I'll go to their profile, look at their display picture, look at their bio, make a joke about that in reply to them. But that's when I'm having a bad day. A lot of times I'll just see that, process it. I'll be like, okay, I don't need to reply to this because he wants me to reply to it. Like, he sent the thing, message with the hope that, oh, he's going, like, I don't want to give him the satisfaction of knowing that he's ruined my day, even if he has. So that's sort of my process of try to spend as little time on social media as possible. Like, I've unfollowed most people on social media as well. Like, I only follow like actual friends now on social media, that too from like a separate like fake account.
Yeah,
Well,
right.
not fake account, it has my name, but it's
Yeah,
like a personal account. So like my personal life stuff and all I share on that, and I keep my main verified account just for like comedy, and it's personal and professional, so to speak.
right.
And I found maintaining that separation to be nice as well, because when a lot of times you do want to share your life and talk, and it is nice to share your life and get a little
Updates.
bit of validation and dopamine.
Yeah,
But then when it comes to posting that on like my personal artist page, which is 100,000 this thing, and then getting randoms coming and replying about, just say, oh, your cat is ugly, and I'm like,
yeah,
but I don't want to like engage with these people.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
just want to be
absolutely.
able to post about my cat and have people say nice things about it. So I have a separate account for that. But yeah, I think staying off social media is the best thing for mental health. And also I think finding routine,
Yeah,
as hard as it is, especially for people like us who don't have proper jobs, I think just finding that, and it's the most cliche advice that all of us as young people have run away from, but just waking up early in the morning, dude.
mm,
It just makes the entire day go so much better.
absolutely,
So
man.
yeah,
It gives you some sense of enjoying the day, because otherwise it's just living for those couple of hours in the night, which was a
yeah,
stage time, and then the
yeah,
drinking after, and then it's just like this 0 to 100, and then it crash again. You wake up at 12, and again you're
yeah,
waiting for that little rush to come your way. But it's
yeah.
such a important thing to acknowledge, right? Just waking up in the morning, just smelling that fresh air, getting the first rays of sun. Oh, it really is amazing what it does for you.
Yeah, and this is just like the everything is like calm and just quiet at that
Yeah,
time. It's before, like, I mean, first we don't have, like, we have help who comes in at like 11:30, and
yeah,
then just like before, like, there's the house descends into that little bit of chaos for 2 hours. You just
yeah,
have that. I think there's a reason why, a lot of like these art films have these fancy scenes of, a guy wakes up in the morning and he's making his eggs, and the coffee is being poured in a very nice aesthetic manner and all of that, and it
yeah,
it actually, and it's calming music playing, because that for me, that getting up in the morning and making breakfast is a very therapeutic
yeah.
activity. Like, I really enjoy that.
It's almost the difference between, and I'm not saying like waking up at 4 a.m. or anything like that, but it's
Yeah,
almost
yeah,
like when you wake up at like 11 or noon, it's like the rest of the day you're still trying to catch up. But when you wake up at like 7, 6, 7, or 8 even, it's like
yeah,
you've got some time to face the day on your own terms. And I feel that
yeah,
gives you so much more poise and ability to kind of take whatever comes your way, right? Whether it's good news, bad news, whether it's disappointment, whether it's
yeah.
people irritation, annoyance, and it just feels lovely to have that feeling that, you know what, I'm able to process what's coming my way, as opposed to, oh shit, there's another thing I have to catch up with, there's another thing I have to deal with. It just
Yeah.
makes you feel more flustered.
Yeah, it's like you just, like, if you wake up late, you just launched into the day. Like, oh shit, I'm up now. I just have to start doing things. As opposed to,
Yeah,
like, I think if you wake up even by like 8, 9 in the morning, you can just ease into your day. Or at least with my
absolutely.
schedule, I can. A lot of
No,
people
same
have
here.
to wake up at 7 and go to work. So
Yeah, no, no, I think that's a great feeling. But well, before we wind up, I mean, this is the second time saying that, but I'm glad that you're at a place emotionally and with your mental health, which is good. But what's in store for people listening who are fans of your work? I'm sure a lot of people will be excited to find out what you're going to do and what's in store, because I think this will come out sometime at the end of July or early August. So
oh,
what's
perfect. Yeah.
yeah? So if you have your shows coming up, I'd love for you to share that with them.
Yeah, I mean, I have a bunch of shows planned. I have a sort of India tour. I was telling Sandeep before we started recording that there's this one thing. that I've wanted to do for like years and kept putting it off. I'm like, no, it's too indulgent to do this and all that. But basically, just taking my car and driving across the country and doing shows. So just from doing Bombay, so I'm doing one of Bombay and all of Gujarat, which is in the start of August. So I'm
Uh-huh.
doing shows there, driving across. Then I'm doing Bombay, Thane, Pune, Goa, Bangalore leg as well, where I'm driving across. And then the weekdays, I sort of take off and just like go stay in a quiet Airbnb somewhere and just like read and write or whatever.
Nice.
I think it's a nice change from, because when I do feel that we're just sitting at home, particularly with the lifestyles that we have, you tend to fall into a little bit of a rut. And I think once you're just displaced from that a little bit, I think it kickstarts a little bit of creativity and a little bit of work. And even I'm not putting pressure on it. Even if I just go and I just sit and read a few books for a few days, it's something that I wouldn't end up doing at home anyway because of just so much distraction, the TV, internet, and this and
Yeah.
that.
And meet
So
people you haven't met. That's yeah, sounds great.
yeah,
And you like
so
driving.
doing that.
You like doing that.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah, love that. And yeah, I have a big show in Mumbai in September, and I'm also coming to London and Amsterdam in September on the 17th and 24th to do shows.
nice.
Yeah, and after that, hopefully going to Norway for a week to see if we can catch some northern lights. So,
Nice. Northern Lights. That's yeah. That should be a nice break and just get some
mm.
cold air. That sounds great, man. But it's
Yeah.
I'm excited for you, and yeah, looking forward to meeting you when you're in town. And good
Yes.
luck with everything. And great hearing from you. And thanks for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Sandeep. Always a pleasure.
Cheers, bro.